over here. And I won't really get into the detail yet until I've applied that local value. So I'm ready for a little bit of blue into my lavender right here. I'll just softly add that. And I work part to part. It's really the best way to do this. You'll note that the shadowy areas, such as this little bit of leaf here, can simply be done by taking straight green and going pretty heavily over that surface. I'll take a little bit of my alizarin, create a deepness to it, and I'll just add it over straight. You can work thinly in that area, or you can work fairly thickly. It's really up to you. But that gives me the opportunity to harden an edge or soften an edge if I elect to. But you see that dark, that black behind it, really kind of does my job for me. And you'll note that there are a lot of things, especially in this particular mock-up, that sort of sit back. There's certain things in a printout that you might not necessarily notice when you layer a color over that black. Note that is a green. Okay, so I'll scrub that green over that entire area, and I'll do it fairly thinly. And you'll note that the areas that are lightly indicated, such as the eyelet there, don't really need a lot of definition. So how I would work something that's in a shadow is just simply add the green. And mind you, I didn't even use any medium for that. I don't necessarily need to use a medium for that. I can just scrub it on, because there are certain colors on your palette, over to the palette. There are certain colors on your palette like your sap green, your alizarin crimson, your umbers, especially your sienna, and even your yellow ochre that actually already are transparent, okay? Certain colors like white, your blue, anything with white in it, like your Naples yellow, or even your cadmiums your cadmiums are fairly transparent, even though they're really kind of intense. So back on over, please. In order to darken it, sometimes I can add maybe something like a little bit of my burnt umber, but not too much because I don't want to warm it up. If I warm up a shadow, I get in trouble. What's the rule about warmth and cool? Warm pops.
Cool receipts.
Good. Thank you. You're my minions. I can also add a little bit of red to my green in order to really deepen that green. So I'll take a little bit of the red and I'll work it in wet to wet. And this is generally how I work even when I'm not glazing. So most of you learned a type of glaze where you use a lot of medium. This equally is glazing. Okay? It's the same thing. However, you use more of a sort of scrubbing technique. And I move on to the next thing. And when I see an area that's black, very often I don't actually use black. I'll use burnt umber or I'll use straight blue for an area like this. Maybe even just straight blue. And what that'll do is that'll cool off that intense dark shadow. But it'll still retain its hue. So it's not actually blue, because the blue that I'm using is fairly transparent, right? And the more I spread it out, and the more I thin it out, and now you see the importance of actually using a hog hair bristle here, the leaner it is, the more it will fall back into space. The thicker your paint is, the closer up it will seem, okay? Which is why I say the lightest areas should pretty much be the thickest. So if I go back and sort of work these a little bit, I can make for a sort of orange. I don't really have a cadmium on here. And I can work it in wet. Usually I work in 2 layers in order to finish a painting. So I will literally cover this whole thing and then go back and deal with it when it's dry. Things on paper, because it's sealed, take a little while to dry. So it really is all about the planning. It's all about the planning. Questions?
What kind of paper do you use?
That's a good question. I use Fabriano or Arches watercolor 140 pound. If you don't want to mount Like if you don't want to mount this paper, if you weren't doing what I do, and you don't want to mount this paper onto a panel, which I wouldn't recommend because it's actually very hard to get it cleanly done, get 300 pound. That way you can just simply put it behind a mat and stick it in a frame.
Do you use cold press or hot press?
I use hot press, but I'm also a very hard edge painter. This is the way I smooth things out generally. I don't use my brushes sacrificially for this. I like hot press. Hot press is a smooth, non-tooth paper. So if you like really hard edge, like photorealist stuff, use the hot press. If you like expressive mark making, go with the cold press or the rough. Okay? Other questions? If you screw up, you can just take a little bit of your terp and pick it up. That is it. Okay? You can turn it off now.